Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Shane Ryan, the Development Officer for RIT's Kate Gleason College of Engineering, and I'm your moderator for today's event. We are happy to have you join us and hope that your entire Tiger family is well. As we continue to weather this new working environment, we want you to know that RIT's Office of Alumni Relations is available to help all RIT alumni with a variety of needs, including new virtual content, learning opportunities, and networking and career assistance through the new normal of pandemic realities. We especially encourage everyone to connect with the RIT Alumni Association social media channels, including Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, where you will find up-to-date communications and opportunities to connect with other Tiger alumni in your region and your industry. Those links can be found in the chat box. The chat box can be opened by clicking on the chat tab at the right of your webinar window. Many in our RIT family have asked how they can help students and the university as we respond to the pandemic, and we are incredibly grateful for those offers. There are two ways you can help. First, our new graduates and current students are seeking positions for full-time careers and co-ops, respectively. Many of these positions have been delayed or canceled entirely. If your company is hiring, we could ask you to consider adding a co-op post. Interested in adding a co-op post, please contact Chris Steeler in RIT's Career Services Office and allow her to post that position in our system. In addition, there are an unprecedented need for financial aid scholarships for continuing incoming Tiger students. If you are able to make a gift, please click on the link in the chat box. Thank you. We want to invite all RIT alumni who attend special virtual events this week to two special virtual events this week. First, there is an alumni town hall discussion on Wednesday, June 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern with President Dave Munson and Dr. Keith Jenkins from the Division of Diversity Inclusion. Doctors Munson and Jenkins will be discussing RIT's response to the COVID-19 crisis and current climate of protests over racism. They will share the administration's vision for RIT and preparations for our students return to campus in the fall. Registration is required and the link can be found in the chat box. Then on Thursday evening, June 25th, we invite all Tigers to enjoy an evening of entertainment from our student performing artists. Tigers Helping Tigers, an event to move students forward, is a celebration of Tiger talent and creativity to support RIT students during this time of unprecedented challenges. It will stream live on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. The registration link is in the chat box, and we hope you join us and enjoy performances from over a dozen RIT and NTID student groups and individuals. Now, just a few housekeeping points. We want to ensure that everyone is familiar with the presentation tools. If you're joining from a remote location and currently signed into your company's VPN, we encourage you to close that channel during the webinar to increase the quality of the transmission. The webinar platform is secure without VPN. All attendees joined in mute mode. However, your questions can be entered in the chat box at any time throughout the discussion. We will make an effort to address your comments and questions throughout the webinar. You are joining this event using broadcast audio. If you wish to dial in by phone, dial-in information is provided in the chat box. Live captioning can also be provided, and you can find the link to access that in the chat box as well. This webinar will be recorded and made available to complete with captions in approximately 1 week following today's event. All participants will receive an email with the link to the recording. If you are having any technical questions, please feel free to type those in the chat box as well, and we will do our best to get you the appropriate answers. We are very pleased to welcome Kate Gleason College of Engineering alumna, Christine Vargas. Christine holds a BS in Industrial Engineering and is president of Vargas Associates and the visionary behind the firm's work. Vargas Associates offers interior design skills to create functional, creative workspaces, along with exceptional project management, expertise in relocation management, and a thorough knowledge of how furniture, fixtures, and equipment must be coordinated. Christine oversees many of the firm's projects and collaborates with a variety of professionals to ensure successful completion of each client's project. She has more than 25 years of design and project management experience with a portfolio that includes many high-profile healthcare, municipal, and educational projects in the greater Rochester and Buffalo, Niagara areas. She employs a dedication to excellence and a whatever-it-takes attitude approach that set the pace for the work of the highest caliber. In addition to her work at Vargas Associates, Christine also served on the Cape Gleason College of Engineering Dean's Advisory Council and was inducted into the College of Industrial and System Engineering Academy in February. Christine, thank you for joining us today on a topic that is the top of mind for many preparing to go back to our office environments. Our audience is all yours.
Thanks, Shane, and I'd like to thank the RIT Alumni Association for hosting me today. And I hope that everyone who is attending this webinar will find some value and be able to bring back some ideas to their spaces in terms of getting ready to reopen and helping us get back to our new normal. So going ahead and starting this webinar here, we're going to cover a few different topics. We're going to talk about office spaces, restaurants, retail, and a bit of a forecast on education. That's still evolving, but definitely we'll have some things that will need to be considered as we're looking at education going forward. So when we're looking at reopening, some things that we need to think about. Everyone's space is a little bit different, so keep in mind that some of these things will apply to you and some may not apply to you depending upon what you have. But if you're dealing with multiple locations, we're encouraging you to think about trying to stagger when you might be reopening. And the reason being is you're going to learn a lot when you go through this for the first time. You're going to be able to iron out some of your processes, and then rolling forward, anything you do subsequently will benefit. We're also encouraging any type of organization or company to think about surveying their employees. And I know some people, when I say surveying, they get a little bit nervous, like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to open up the floodgates for input. But we have helped some organizations with this. And a lot of it really focuses on understanding where they are in terms of coming back to a space that used to have no restrictions, no one really worried about feeling safe. What we're seeing is that how different individuals define that safety piece for them, it's a little bit different. And if you can at least listen and try to incorporate some of their ideas or thoughts or concerns into your reopening plan, it'll definitely benefit you as you roll it out. And then there are guidelines for those of you that are viewing us from New York State. There's guidelines that New York State has put forth. If you're viewing this from another state, I encourage you to take a look at what your state has issued. A lot of the things are going to be very similar because a lot of them are based on CDC guidelines and things that are coming to us from a national perspective. So starting with offices, so open plan workstations. There's been a lot of talk about this because open plan has been something that has evolved over the many years now in terms of pulling people out of hardwall offices into open plan workstations. And even then, once people were in open plan, the height of the panels has been being lowered and lowered. And now we even see what we call benching stations, and they don't have any panels at all. So we are looking at, we've been reviewing all different types of product options. And here's a good example of how some spaces are addressing the need to now create division. And this product here shows a mobile panel. It's on wheels. But if you look at it, what we love about it is it can be easily wiped down with cleaner. And where it connects in with the actual surface, there's some height variability. So depending upon what product you might have, it allows you to be able to use it in a few different scenarios and not really worry about the exact height that you might have. Open plan areas are looking at having some type of panel that rises up above the surface now. There's been a huge push for transparency and ability to see out over multiple workstations. So some clients love to see glass instituted, and others are looking at something more made with like a laminate product here that again allows you to wipe it down. We're looking for non-porous materials, and this allows you to create a zone that's the individual could use and kind of protect them from others that might be nearby. If you have low panels, stackers are usually the way to go. So people will come and ask, my gosh, do we need to go and replace all of our panels because maybe they're only 42 inches high or 30 inches high? And quite honestly, most of the time you can just stack additional product on top. And so here in this visual here, the orange is the stacker, and we're not suggesting orange, even though we love RIT. We're not necessarily suggesting that you have to put an orange stacker, but it's just there visually so you can see what was before and what the add-on is. And this means now you look at someone who might be sitting in that chair, we're thinking differently now. Someone coughs next to you, how far is that cough traveling? How far is that sneeze going? And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to raise the panels above that seated height so that when someone's sitting working, they're able to have some protection of what's going on around them. And this can be done in clear glass, frosted glass, different products. If you want to maintain that ability to see out across a space and not necessarily have to walk all the way down, you can still have that open feeling and that transparent feeling in the space. So benching workstations, depending upon how tight they are, some environments have 5 foot, some have 6 foot. You're trying to establish a 6 foot differential. We're seeing this 6 foot distancing. So before COVID, we got some spaces that were super, super tight. Square foot for employee really dropped quite a bit over even the last 10 years. And now, in order to help restore this distancing, we're seeing some staggering going on. And this is in addition to some of the panels that I showed you. And then high traffic areas. So let's just say you have a space and you already have these higher panels. There's the question around cleaning them. So being able to create a space that allows for cleaning now, this product here is something you could actually attach onto a fabric panel. And of course, we're not necessarily going to go through the entire office and convert everything to a non-porous surface. So we're recommending them in high traffic areas where you may have people coming and going a fair amount. This is something that can be wiped down with a cleaner, disinfected periodically, and it's also writable. So now you're introducing at least an extra feature if you're investing in the space. So taking a look at a space plan assessment, we want to talk a little bit about when we look at space, how do we look at it and how do we try to establish a safe space? So we're looking at circles. So a 6 foot diameter around any existing seat you might have will help identify, are people too close or are they far enough away? So what we look at is, you can see green circles and red circles. So obviously green means good and red means we've got an issue. So the red is what we call hot spots. And so if you can quickly identify your hot spots, then you can rectify them. So if you look on the left and you look at the bottom and you see these red circles, it's because there were 3 people really tightly positioned together. And on the right, we take out that middle person and we also add a panel. And now that person has a space that they can work and they don't have to worry about being too close to their coworkers. Conference rooms, let's take a look at those. So on the left is a traditional boardroom. You can see the overlap and you've got people really, really tight together. Even some of the bystanders that are sitting against the wall, you've got them spaced closely together. So now we need to start pulling out furniture, seating, tables, and in the right, really what we're doing is we're converting the space to more of a training room setup, really, where it's 1-for-1. And now you're creating a space where people can spread out. You can still present at the front of the room, but you're going to have fewer occupants. So another example of a conference room here, we see a lot of conference rooms that are set up for 6 to 8 people. Now the decrease in occupancy to about 50%, and maybe even putting a clear screen between. It depends on the depth of your conference room table. That there is going to determine if you do need to space people out a little bit more. But you'll see we took 4 chairs out of that space. Here's a roughly 100 square foot square conference room. We took the table out, we pushed people to the corners. Now you've got proper distancing. Depending upon the conference room space you have, you're going to probably see a decrease of 25 to 50%. And so you might want to think about how you're scheduling conference room spaces. You may want to, if you have an online scheduler and it lists seating capacity, want to go in there and change that so as people are scheduling meetings, they understand the capacity of the room. And even then, you may need to think about having some people present in the actual room, and some people might still use a video conferencing software to attend the meeting from maybe their office or maybe another meeting room to be able to cover the capacity that you need. So the next space, a break room. So this is where people are consuming food. So think about this. You're not only trying to distance so that people have proper social distancing, but when someone's going to consume food, you want to make sure that people aren't really able to walk by and talk over them and things like that. So here we're taking out the pathway to sinks, refrigerators, appliances, and we're actually creating a seating distance that allows for people to consume their own food within their own zone, if you will. So massive change in density. So Hardwell offices, we've talked to a lot of people who say, we're in great shape because we never really got around to renovating our space. We don't have a lot of cubicles. But if you look at the actual space here, you've got 2 visitors that are super tight. So on the left-hand side, we see everyone's just a little too close together. And then on the right, you see us where we're pulling that chair closer to the back wall, and there's only 1 chair. And now you've got proper social distancing. So Hardwell offices are definitely faring better in this environment, but you still need to be mindful about how close that people really are. Collaborative spaces. So individual seats most likely need to be pulled farther apart, and removing tables will also help eliminate surfaces that need to be cleaned or that can get contaminated. But this visual here shows 2 chairs where people can still sit and collaborate. There's a tablet, you can pop up a laptop or what have you, and you can still meet and talk. If you're going to throw a whiteboard into the conversation, just again, remember, you're going to have a much bigger space now for collaborating. So lobby areas. I'm sure we've been to many congested lobbies. So if you think about this now, if you're designing from scratch, you really need to think about individual spaces when people are waiting. But we really like to identify super cost-effective solutions. So this one's a little bit more involved. Here's a super simple, if you have the capacity, just put signs down and ask people to use every other chair, and then you now have some distancing. If you have a very congested lobby, you may need to look at spacing people out and or decreasing the amount of visitors that you can have in one specific time frame. So waiting areas. We've all been to the supermarket by now, I'm sure, and we've seen the decals on the floor, wait here, then proceed. So depending upon your environment, anytime you need to have people waiting, you just need to tell them how to act differently. So when you have people coming back who haven't been into a space in a long time, they're going to go back to what they knew. They go back to habit. But if you stop and communicate and say, hey, we need to do this differently now, most people are pretty good rule followers. They just need to be told how to do that, and then most of them will comply accordingly. So touchless solutions. So some of these are super cost efficient, quick changes that can be made. Others are a little bit more involved and would lean more towards when you're ready to undergo a project. But if you're looking at faucets, soap dispensers, towel dispensers, things of that nature, even trash receptacles, these aren't too expensive to modify if you haven't done so already. And it allows us to do things kind of hands-free, if you will, and not touch things as much. We see a lot of lighting sensors, and the added benefit that there is energy. So really, a lot of those were installed from an energy efficient approach, but quite honestly, now people want them so we don't have to touch common surfaces. So doors, automated doors now. A lot of the automatic entry doors were cost prohibitive, but now if you've got a sensor and the door will automatically open, that's great, especially for public spaces. But if you're in a space that needs to have a card reader, or you need to be authenticated before you can actually get into a space, now there's a lot of security systems that you can tie in where there's facial recognition. You can even have a facial recognition software that will have a thermometer incorporated, and that will read your temperature, and it'll say, okay, this is Christine Vargas. She's allowed to come in, but wait a minute, is she of the temperature that we're permitting? And it can read my temperature, and then it can activate the bag lock, and bam, I'm in. So there's all kinds of neat things now. There's different apps, different Bluetooth-enabled devices that allow us to be able to touch fewer surfaces, and with that, it means less contamination and less spreading of different germs. So switching gears here to restaurants, indoor dining, and I'm going to speak for our specific region. We had 5 counties in the state of New York that really got out of the gate early. So for us, we started June 12th. If you're in the second wave, that included Erie County and some of the other adjacent counties, they're only a couple days behind, so they should really be into this phase as well. But indoor dining, what it means to the restaurant industry is that you can't have more than 50% of the maximum capacity. And this is going to be driven by the certificate of occupancy that was issued when that establishment was built. So if you need to reference that, I highly recommend you take a look at it, because it could be that you weren't really serving previously at your maximum certificate of occupancy. Tables have to be positioned 6 foot apart. So this is a little bit different than what I just talked about, where individuals need to be 6 foot apart. It's the tables themselves. And if you can't maintain that 6 foot, you're asked to insert a 5 foot high protective barrier in between patrons. So you have people typically come in a group, a certain size party. So when you're coming to a restaurant now, if you're going to sit with other people, it's because they're from the same party. You can't say, hey, would you mind if we positioned you next to so-and-so? Because we have 2 extra seats there. If they didn't come together, they can't sit together. And so a maximum of 10 people in that given party. So if somebody is scheduling an event and it involves 15 or 20 people because you're celebrating a birthday or something, this isn't really back to business as usual. There are definitely limits on what you can do when you go out to an establishment. The bar seating took a big hit. 6 foot distance between all the individuals seated at a bar. So that is really going to be very limited in terms of ability to help with the new rules within the restaurant itself. And the 6 feet for patrons when they're waiting. This is also taking up space. So for instance, if someone's waiting to order, waiting to pay, if they're there to pick up their food because they ordered online, if they're waiting to use the restroom, 6 foot distancing. So back to those markers on the floor, signs on the walls. People need to know where they need to wait while they're waiting. And so this is where you may see a restaurant may say, please wait outside while you're waiting for your table to come, because all of these people are now taking up space, and that's something that they're obviously hoping to put towards their paying customers. So there's a diagram that shows before and after. And so as you can see, 100% capacity versus 50% capacity, this is why the restaurant industry is really hit hard, even though they're allowed to reopen. There's all types of numbers that they're running to make sure that they can still be profitable. Outdoor dining started roughly a week earlier. This also applies to any areas that have outdoor bar areas. Again, the tables, bar tops, 6 feet apart, 5 foot barriers if you can't maintain. and I'm sorry, that should say 6 feet apart. Food and or beverages have to be consumed sitting down. So patrons can't just grab a drink and say, hey, I see my friend Marty. I haven't seen him in a while. Let me get up and go talk to him. Can't grab that drink and walk over. So the rules are a little bit different. And this is where people just need to know coming in so that the establishment can make sure that they're compliant with what the state expects. Individuals at the same table, again, have to be the same party, even though they're outside, and still a maximum of 10 people per party. So other things, people need to wear masks, except for when they're seated at their table and obviously consuming their food or beverages. There need to be designated entrances and exits for patrons, and this has to be separate from the employees themselves. What we're seeing is that many establishments are choosing to distribute plates after the patrons have been seated, and therefore there's really not a lot of concern about how long has this plate been out, who's been walking by, has someone else been seated here and got up and moved. So these are mindful things that I think patrons are going to be happy to see. Pre-packaged plastic or silverware, so that again people know that it's been protected. Protective glass around hostesses and cashiers. Trying to limit the number of people who come to the table. So if there's one server and that person is dealing with them the whole time, they take their order, they're bringing out their order. I know in the past you might see different people helping to bring out different entrees, but now limiting the number of people who've been involved. We're still going to see a lot of hand sanitizer stations. Reservations are definitely going to be encouraged so that the establishments can plan. And no fans. So why do I say no fans? When you're outside, you may see in hot weather, fans are used to help cool people because there's no HVAC. But if you're talking and there's a fan behind you and you accidentally spray, guess what? The fan's going to now help perpetuate that beyond 6 feet. So don't be frustrated if you do see restaurants not happy about putting out fans because they just want to keep people safe. So keep that in mind. Touchless solutions, many similar to what we talked about, but also disposable menus. So you touch it once, it goes in the trash. Establishments may be directing you to use your smartphone for digital menus. There may be contactless ordering going on. Little things like propping open doors so there's fewer touch points. Touchless faucets, dispensers, hand drying, trash bins, and those touch-free door openers, which you may have seen already, and I'll show you momentarily. Public areas, retail. So workforce and customer presence combined is limited to 50% of the maximum occupancy per their certificate of occupancy that was issued when the space was built out. Customers need to maintain 6 feet from each other. So I've already seen, you may have already seen if you've gone out to a retail establishment, there may be a line waiting outside to get in because they are restricted in the number of individuals that can be in their establishment at any given time. Marking floors, reducing the bi-directional traffic. So when you see a one-way arrow, look at the floor. If you see an arrow, it means that's one-way traffic. Marking floors to designate where people should be related to aisles and registers. Separate entrances and exits again. We're seeing that at a lot of places. We should keep in mind, though, that if there is ever a fire, limiting people to one exit is never really typically in fire code. So if you've got questions, if you're changing the flow, you may want to just consult someone to make sure you're still complying with fire code in regards to exits. Fitting rooms. Some fitting rooms are not open anymore. Those that are should be supplying some type of hygiene for employees to be able to wipe down common use surfaces. You're seeing single service bars, sampling stations for food. Those are really not open at this time, and they're not going to be probably for a while. Elimination of bulk bins where you see people digging through a lot of things. Probably not going to see a lot of that right now, and continue to see more hand sanitizer stations. So behind the scenes in employee areas, so if you do run a retail establishment, again, keep in mind that it's the workforce and customer presence is limited to 50%. So even though the public can't see your backroom area, you're still limited overall to 50%. One person, if you have confined areas where you can't limit it to one person, and it could be behind a register, things might be tight the way they're positioned, people need to wear masks. And that 50% capacity rule is going to apply. Any workspaces that you may need to modify them to be able to maintain that distance between employees. And this is dependent upon the retail setup. You may need to look at that specifically and how you're going to modify that. But again, they do at least allow for those physical barriers. Touchless processing for merchandise deliveries. We've seen a lot of that where deliveries may be able to be made with limiting the number of people that have to touch them. And if you can leave deliveries in a specific area and allow for verification to happen after drivers have left, again, it's individuals are not making contact as much as maybe they needed to previously. And then behind the scenes, there's usually coordination meetings of some sort, limiting the in-person gatherings. But when you do need to have them, make sure people are using masks. If people can video conference in, that's always encouraged, and making use of hand sanitizer stations. So here's some visuals. You know, again, people are really good usually when there's a sign, explains what to do. You can see in the back their stanchions, their areas are roped off. You've got a line on the floor, and you've got markers on the floor so that people know where to go and where the flow is expected to be. Here you see checkout areas, and just again, please wait here, and then you can proceed accordingly. So I want to talk a little bit about restroom protocols. We usually field a lot of questions about restrooms. So the importance of hanging signage is really critical. When you talk about people are used to conducting themselves a certain way and they just go back to what they knew, there's a lot of change in regards to restroom protocols. So the first one is asking people to wash their hands before they actually use the toilet. So you're coming into the restroom, you're washing your hands, then you're using the facilities, then you're coming out, and then you're washing your hands again, and then you're leaving. Asking that masks be worn while they're actually in the restroom is encouraged, because people do get into tight quarters, and depending upon the volume, again, you may need to modify how many people you're allowing in a given restroom at a given time. I've seen some pedal ledges on back of doors so people can actually just touch them with their foot and it automatically opens the door. So this is some hardware here. You can see you just touch it with your foot, you put pressure on it, the door releases, and then you can walk out without having to touch anything with your hands. These are not very expensive, and is one of our recommendations, maybe a Best Buy, if you will, in terms of how to get through some of this without having to impact your budget too much. So where you've got things that are too close together, so this could be urinals, this could be stalls, this could be sinks, taping off those that are just too close together, so those in between, so that people are automatically spacing out. There's a recommendation that the jet air dryers not be used right now. And the reason being is that they tend to spread aerosols in the air and contaminate surfaces. So when you think about it, when you're air drying and your hands are still wet and they're still dripping and those drops are hitting the wall, sometimes, you know, if someone didn't do a good job cleaning their hands, they're really still spreading germs. So really encouraging the use of paper towels, a trash container, and if you don't have that automatic ability to open the door, the trash bin really should be at the exit, so someone can easily open a door with a clean paper towel that they haven't used, and then boom, it goes in the trash. Those touchless devices, again, if they haven't been installed yet, this is really a good time to do it. If there's an opportunity to improve ventilation, the restrooms can be very congested at times. This is definitely an area where ventilation improvements are usually helpful. And implementing more stringent cleaning schedules. So, we've all seen the schedules on the back of a door where someone comes in and they put their initials, they say, well, I cleaned this at 10 o'clock, noon, or whatever. Well, maybe if you went by hourly, now it's hourly. If you're in an office setting and you're cleaning, someone was cleaning it daily, maybe it's twice a day now, just to increase it based on the known frequency of those restrooms getting used. And finally, the direction that restrooms are going is consideration of UV light to come in and automatically clean these facilities. There's disinfectant spray blasts as well, but you can use different upcoming technologies. And I think any type of technology that's focusing on automatic cleaning, I think there's going to be a lot of interest in that going forward. So we talk a lot about communication. Any good plan includes hanging up signs, using digital monitors to communicate how we're going to do things new. This could be for employees, it could be for visitors. The minute someone comes into your facility, what's the protocol? Are you asking them to use hand sanitizer? Are you asking them to sign in? There's a lot of contact tracing going on now. So when people come in, do they need to log in? So if there's any type of outbreak, they can be contacted accordingly. What's happening now? Are we changing the density of given spaces, like I talked about with the conference room? Are we changing the use of certain spaces because we needed to spread out employees? So maybe now a common area that people just come in and pop up a laptop is now assigned space, because maybe we just didn't have the budget to modify previous spaces. Are there any new roles that people need to know about? Am I expected to wipe down my space at the end of the day? If you're having any type of shared space, you need to have a cleaning protocol in place at the end of the workday so that it's been completely sanitized for the next person who might use it the next day. So, and just even reminders about social distancing. So here's an example of a conference room sign where you could be changing from an 8-person to a 4-person room, putting this up on the door so that people know, and then what are the other protocols? So if you're asking people to wipe down surfaces, they should need to know that now these are the new rules about using the space. And oh, by the way, make sure you have the cleaning materials in the room so that they're readily there and it's super easy to do, versus somebody now having to run around and figure out, I can't find the Lysol wipes. Well, how am I going to do this? Chances are they probably won't do it. So elevators. If you're in a facility where you can encourage the single use of an elevator, that's ideally the best situation. Push people to use the stairs where they can. Keep in mind, anybody who can't use the stairs definitely needs to be able to use an elevator. We have all types of facilities that we deal with. So high rises, clearly this is not a feasible approach. So putting the distancing markers in the corners of an elevator, elevators should not exceed that 50% capacity. But if you put things on the corners of the floor, this will direct people to stand in a corner. Masks would be required. And again, if you communicate this as people are waiting outside the elevator, they know what to expect when they get into the elevator. And also, while they're waiting, you may create a queue with 6-foot distancing on the floor so people know where to stand. Common reminders, this is a fun sign, just reminds people to keep their distance. Again, people come back into their spaces and they kind of forget about the fact that we need to stay 6 feet apart. They might forget to grab their mask. and then they don't really follow the new rules. So education forecast, this is still evolving. And for those of you who are affiliated with RIT, I'm sure you're dealing with this on a regular basis, but this is what we're seeing so far. And some of this is K-12, and some of this is higher ed, and some of it's both. But keeping students 6 feet apart if they're in a fixed setting is important, and having dedicated seat assignments. So dedicated seat assignments, that's, maybe old school, but now's the time to say, hey, when you come to this class every day, this is where you're going to sit. Just cuts down on cross-contamination. Using the space you have differently. So if we don't have enough space for the students to come into that traditional setting, maybe we're starting to hold classes in other spaces and spreading out accordingly. When the weather's good, maybe we're going outside. Alternating class times and changes and flow of students. So previously, class times ended pretty much at the same time. So staggering that so that the congestion in the hallway is ideally at least cut in half would be fantastic. If you can cut it into a third, even better. Health offices, anywhere that we're dealing with those that may be sick, we need to spread them out. So some people could come in and say, hey, I'm having COVID symptoms, but someone else is coming in and saying, man, I got a gouge and I need a Band-Aid. We don't want those people together. So taking a look at spaces where it could be a health office with a nurse or a clinic or something, we need to really think about how many square feet per person are being allocated, how people are sitting when they're waiting, and what have you. So any space we're eating, spreading things out. How does someone get to the table where they're eating? And is someone going to walk by talking and actually be talking over somebody who's consuming a sandwich, let's say? Physical education programming. So this is a real tough one, depending upon what the programming is. I see programming changing a little bit in the time being, but if things can be brought outside, if space can be used differently, I'm going to throw out those 2 ice rinks. Maybe one of them has to be converted to a physical education space because it's a big area that people can spread out. Hybrid of at-home and at-school learning, I do think we're going to see a bunch of that. And I think that especially students being encouraged not to come into the classroom if they're not feeling well. So how are we setting up technology to be able to support that in-classroom learning, but we're doing it from home or a dorm room so that students can still learn, but they are really not coming into a space where they might be not feeling so great. My prediction, no perfect attendance awards anymore. I think we're gonna pull that away because we don't want people to be coming in for the wrong reasons. So, and then higher education shifting. We do see this. We've been talking with multiple higher ed environments and just seeing this shift to a more condensed schedule. This late August, mid-August to November. Some are trying to finish by November. We've seen some that are saying that they're going to finish in class by November, but they're going to still have some video conferencing classes going on and maybe a few more weeks of actual programming going on, and then finishing up according to their traditional semester schedule. We're hearing about a larger break, but again, this is just a prediction. And we do see maybe that spring semester looking a little bit different, again, maybe condensed, a little later start. And this is just to schedule around what the traditional flu season looks like. Keeping students, if you're going to go home and stay there until you're really ready to come back. But then when you come back, try to limit the back and forth. So stay tuned on that. That's still evolving. But as with everything I've talked about, it's just different. And if that can get communicated ahead of time, it really does help with decreasing the anxiety around change, and people can plan accordingly. And I think when people are given a preview of what to expect before they return, it helps quell their concerns about a safe environment, and it allows them to be able to feel good about that change. And usually once people get going, they get back to just focusing on what they're there for, and that's there to learn and be a part of the community. So, all right, with that, if you have questions, feel free to share them. If you'd like a copy of this presentation, we're happy to send out a PDF copy. You can send it to the contact us at vargasassociates.com. We've also developed a series of checklists. So if you would like some help trying to just get your head around all the things you might need to do, we have made those available. And this is about helping. So to that point, they're available in an open format that you can then modify yourself. They're our gift to you to help those that are have a lot on their plate and to get through these next few months and going forward. So feel free to reach out.
All right, just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them using the chat box feature on the right. Christine, I did see one come in that said that was asking about recommended panel heights. What would you recommend is the recommended panel height for going back to work?
So if you're dealing with that office environment where you have those open plan workstations, we're recommending to try to get at least to a 55-inch high panel. We're not necessarily going to create an environment that works for 100% of the people, but at seated height, a 55-inch panel is providing a fair amount of height above the seated person. And you know, if you're 6'4" and you stand up, you're going to be able to obviously see out over those panels. So any type of environment isn't necessarily going to be 100% for every single person, but even a 6'4" person sitting down wouldn't be able to get over that 55-inch high. So, and keep that in mind. A lot of this is based on a plan that then needs to be implemented with just some good thought in mind. But a 55-inch high panel should do it for pretty much most situations.
Thank you. I did see one come in on how would we be able to serve our deaf and hard of hearing students with masks. Clear mask would be best. Do you have any recommendations for dealing with our deaf or hard of hearing population?
So we don't typically get into the specifics of PPE, but obviously if you can see someone's lips, it helps with the deaf community. So, and I don't know if this person's specifically referring to, but I did see some of the clear masks that are out there. Keep in mind, if people can maintain the 6-foot distance safely, they don't need to have a mask on. And even for all those that are in an environment, we're just going to see more video conferencing from within the actual space because people can participate a little bit more freely without a mask. We're going to see people FaceTiming and their office is next door that they're talking to the person. So you don't necessarily have to have a mask 100% of the time, but if you're the big thing within spaces when you're transitioning from one space to another, you really should have a mask on because you don't know who's going to come by. You don't know if all of a sudden you're going to turn a corner and you're going to run into a bunch of people. I know here in our office, unless you're sitting at your desk, you pretty much have to have a mask on. If you're going up to the copier, if you're going to somebody else's office, but then once you get positioned, you're free to take your mask off. So hopefully that helps a little bit. It's not easy going long periods of time with a mask on.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. Any other questions at this time?
Well, again, feel free to reach out if you have questions or you think of questions later. We truly are helping with guidance. We get questions all the time about, can you help send me in the right direction for product? We're happy to do that. We've been fortunate enough to have a lot of great interior designers come out of the RIT program, and they are excited about helping the community and being a part of getting us all reopened again. So really, it's our gift to our communities and beyond. If there's any way we can just help you with your challenge, we're an open door. Feel free to reach out.
All right. Well, thank you, Christine, and thank you to our audience for joining us today. Additional questions can be emailed to ritalum@rit.edu, or we will directly answer your questions send our questions to our presenters. All audience members will receive an email from us in about a week with a link to today's webinar recording. You can also see a full listing of upcoming virtual events like today's webinar at rit.edu/alumni/tigers-staying-home for a listing of our upcoming virtual events. We have several each week, and we'd like to include you in as many of these events as possible. Please exit this webinar by simply closing out your browser window. And please do let us know what you thought of the webinar through a brief survey that you will receive via email. Have a wonderful week, and please stay safe.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, Christine.